I woke up at 5 a.m. to a sound I thought was thunder. But when I stepped onto my porch, I saw a 7-foot trench cutting me off from the world, and the HOA standing there, smiling. They thought they had me trapped. They thought a fake permit and a bulldozer would force me to sell. What they didn't know was that my entire property, from the fence posts to the birdhouse, was wired with hidden cameras, and the footage I captured that night, it didn't just stop them, it sent them to prison. If you want to understand how I ended up in a moment like that, standing over a trench with a shotgun in my mind, you've got to go back with me, back a long way. Because none of this started with bulldozers, or fake permits, or HOA thugs pretending they were doing community improvement. No, for me, it started 30 years earlier. Behind an old barn on a quiet patch of Oklahoma dirt. I was 12 years old when my father took me out back to show me how to replace a fuel filter on our old generator. Most folks would have called a mechanic, not Dad. He believed in doing things yourself, not because it was cheaper, but because it tied you to the land, made you responsible for it. He handed me a wrench, heavy, cold steel against my palm, and said something I've never forgotten. This land runs because we know how to keep it running. I didn't get the weight of those words back then, not really, but they sunk into me anyway, like rainwater disappearing into that red Oklahoma clay. We lived on 12 acres just outside Tulsa, not fancy land, just honest land. Cottonwoods leaning toward the creek, fences that needed mending each spring, and a workshop Dad built with his own 2 hands. After he passed, all of it came to me, and for over 20 years, I kept it mostly the same. Same soil, same house, same porch looking out at the fields. Folks called it outdated. Some called it stubborn. I called it home. In a world that pushes you into boxes you didn't choose, HOA boxes, zoning boxes, neighbors who complain about your grass boxes, having something truly yours, that means everything. I rebuilt the porch myself after a tornado tore half of it away in 2014. Spent 3 summers installing a solar rig out back so I wouldn't be beholden to the grid. Dug the well deeper when city water started tasting like copper pennies. My closest neighbors were deer coyotes and a cow from old Tom Halverson's place that wandered over whenever his fence sagged. Peaceful, predictable, a life measured by seasons, not schedules. And I liked it that way, but the world has a nasty habit of creeping closer, inch by inch. Until one day, you wake up and realize someone else's idea of progress is bumping right up against your fence line. That happened 4 years ago. Developers rolled in with polished boots and million-dollar smiles. They unrolled blueprints on the hood of a shiny truck and talked about modern community experiences and shared values. What they really meant was cookie-cutter houses on quarter-acre lots with rules about what color your front door could be. They built a perimeter fence around their new subdivision, Sunny Hollow, and their western boundary ran right up against mine. I figured that'd be the end of it. Let them play HOA on their side, and I'd keep living like a free man on mine. I was wrong. The first sign was small, an envelope, crisp, white, no return address, just the initials SAA pressed into the flap. Inside was an offer to buy my land. Community expansion, they called it. Said I'd be fairly compensated. I tossed it straight into the fire pit and watched it turn to ash. 2 weeks later came another letter, this time with a number highlighted in yellow. $600,000. A lot of money for someone who doesn't know what 12 acres really means. To me, it wasn't even close. Because you can't put a price tag on where your father stood, where you learned to hold a wrench, where you've lived more life than the folks making offers ever will. I ignored them. I shouldn't have. Because ignoring an HOA president like Karen Martell, well, that was like poking a rattlesnake with a short stick. You might not get bit immediately, but the strike is coming, and that is where the war really began. Things didn't go bad all at once. They rarely do. Trouble usually starts quietly, almost politely, just enough to make you doubt your own instincts. And that's exactly how Sunny Hollow began its crawl toward my land. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday morning. I was out checking the fence line near the creek when I heard a sound, a high-pitched whine, not a mosquito, not a wasp. This was mechanical. I looked up and saw a small black drone hovering lower than any hobby toy had business hovering, close enough that I could see the camera lens, twisting, focusing. It lingered there, watching, then zipped off like it had a schedule to keep. I tried to shake it off. Drones are everywhere these days, but that wasn't the last one. Over the next week, I saw 3 more, each one hovering lower, slower, more deliberate. Then came Thursday. I spotted a white sedan parked right up against the Sunny Hollow line. Engine off. Windows tinted so dark you couldn't see a silhouette inside. It didn't move for 2 hours. When I finally started walking toward it, the car rolled away. No hurry, no panic, just calm. Like whoever was inside wanted me to know they weren't afraid to wait. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were birdwatching. Maybe I was just an old man getting paranoid. But the next thing that happened, paranoia had nothing to do with it. I was repairing a loose hinge on one of the pasture gates when I heard footsteps behind me. Not rushed, not sneaky. Just 2 people walking like they owned the grass they were stepping on. I turned around. 2 men in safety vests, carrying clipboards. They weren't on the HOA side. They were on my side. A good 6 feet past the property line. One was middle-aged, hard hat, a beard that looked like it had been trimmed by a weed eater. The other was younger, maybe mid-20s, nervous eyes. He glanced at me, then quickly looked at his boots. "Can I help you boys?" I asked. My voice wasn't friendly. The older one smiled, that fake, corporate smile. "Survey crew," he said, "checking boundaries." "Great," I said. "Then you know you just crossed mine." The young one's eyes widened. He nudged the older guy's elbow. Mark, we're not supposed to." The older man cut him off, sharply. "We're good. We have administrative access." "From who?" I asked. He didn't answer. They turned to leave, but the younger one, God bless him, looked back at me, and I saw something I didn't expect. Guilt. Actual guilt. He spoke soft, so soft I almost missed it. "You should keep an eye on this place, sir." Then he hurried after the older man. That was breadcrumb number 1, though I didn't know it at the time. Later that evening, I checked the security cameras around my workshop and found something that made my blood run cold. One camera had lost power for exactly 2 minutes, between 1:11 and 1:13 p.m. The exact time I heard that white sedan's door slam earlier that day. Coincidence? Maybe, but I'd lived long enough to know when things didn't add up. 2 days later, I went out to check the mailbox. The lid was halfway open. I reached out to close it and paused. The hinge was warm to the touch, like a hand had been there seconds ago. One of my letters was slightly pulled out. No envelopes missing, no packages taken, just disturbed, like someone wanted to send a message without leaving fingerprints. By then, I wasn't just uneasy, I was on high alert. That quiet Oklahoma instinct my father taught me kicked in, the one that tells you when the woods go too quiet, when you're not as alone as you think. But nothing, and I mean nothing, set me on edge more than what happened on Sunday morning. I walked out with Banjo to grab a tool from my truck. As I rounded the hood, I saw it. A small, perfectly folded paper stuck under my wiper blade. No envelope, no signature, no greeting. Just a single printed line. "You should reconsider the offer." That was the moment I realized the HOA wasn't just persistent. They were circling, and they were getting ready to bite. By the time Sunday rolled into Monday, I'd already made myself a promise. If Sunny Hollow wanted a fight, they weren't getting it easy. But I wasn't prepared for what showed up in my driveway that afternoon. I was fixing a loose latch on the barn door when I heard tires on gravel. Slow tires, deliberate tires, not the sound of a delivery truck or a lost tourist. This was the sound of someone who wanted me to know they were coming. Banjo picked up on it too, ears perked, tail stiff, a low growl rolling out of him like distant thunder. I stepped around the corner just in time to see a spotless white SUV glide to a stop right outside my gate. The kind of SUV you see in HOA magazines, or commercials for luxury detergent. Out stepped a woman, pale blue pantsuit, heels clicking sharply on gravel. Click, 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 like a metronome. She stood tall, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to tell you she'd practiced that stance in a mirror. And she smiled, wide, rehearsed, like she'd been waiting all day to perform it. "Mr. Reed?" she asked. Her voice was bright and polished. "That's me," I said cautiously. She stepped closer, extending her hand like she was the governor of a state she just bought. I'm Karen Martell, president of the Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association. I didn't shake her hand, not out of rudeness, but because something in my gut told me to hold steady. She let her hand drop without missing a beat, that smile still glued on like it was held in place with caulk. We've sent you a few letters, she continued. I noticed. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of confidence you only see in people who've won too many battles without ever fighting a real one. She launched into a speech, smooth, buttery, and completely empty. She talked about community cohesion, shared values, long-term development. She described Sunny Hollow like it was some utopian village carved out of gold leaf and good intentions. I let her talk. Sometimes, silence is the best way to see someone's true gears turning. When she finally paused to breathe, I said it plain, not interested. Her smile didn't flicker, not even a hairline crack. Well, she said gently, I understand this property may hold sentimental value, but I'd encourage you to think of the bigger picture. I pointed behind me at the field, golden grass waving under the afternoon sun, cottonwoods leaning like old friends. This is my bigger picture. There it was, just a flicker. A tiny shadow passed behind her eyes, quick as a blink, but the smile returned instantly. Of course, she said. She reached into her bag and placed a business card on my fence post, like she was marking territory. Just know the offer stands. Then she turned on her heel, slid back into her SUV, and drove away as slowly as she'd arrived, dust rising behind her in a neat, polite little cloud. For a moment, I thought maybe that was the end of it, a bad conversation, a pushy HOA president, nothing more. But then, the strange things started stacking up again, only this time, they leaned harder. 2 days later, I spotted the white sedan again, parked near the boundary. It didn't even try to hide, and the survey crew, they came back. With more equipment. One of them walked the fence line while dragging a metal measuring wheel. The bearded guy acted like he owned the place. But the younger worker, the one with the guilty eyes, kept glancing at me, uneasy. As they passed near my pasture gate, I heard him whisper, Mark, we shouldn't be this close, man. But Mark shut him down. This is Phase 3 territory now. Do your job. Phase 3, territory. Those words stuck to me like burrs. Later, around dusk, I noticed something else. One of the new houses on the HOA side had a bright security spotlight pointed directly at my land. Not toward their yard, toward me. It switched on automatically at sunset, bathing half my field in cold, blinding white light. Not illumination, interrogation. The final push came Friday morning. I woke to find another piece of paper under my wiper blade. Not folded this time, just slapped there like a warning. Same clean font, same tone. You're holding up progress. Progress, their favorite word. The word people use when they want to take something that isn't theirs. I didn't realize it yet, but Karen wasn't done, not even close. She was just done being polite. The thing about trouble is this. Once it finds your doorstep, it doesn't ring the bell and leave. It circles, it waits, it learns your habits. And Sunny Hollow, under Karen's perfectly manicured thumb, was learning mine fast. By the next week, whatever patience they had evaporated. It started on a Wednesday morning, just after sunrise. I was on my porch sipping coffee, watching a pair of crows fight over a pecan, when I noticed movement down by the western tree line. Bright orange vests, reflective tape catching the morning light, surveyors. Again. Only this time, they weren't sticking to their side. I set my cup down and walked toward the fence. Banjo followed close, ears stiff, hackles raised. 3 men were out there, 2 I recognized from before, and a new one, stocky build, shaved head, big boots kicking through the grass like he didn't care what he trampled. The bearded guy, Mark, was barking directions. Start where the flags are. We need a clean path through here, as in my land. The younger worker, the one whose eyes always looked like guilt personified, hesitated when he saw me approaching. He nudged Mark again. Man, we're way over the line this time. Mark snorted. Lines move, you'll learn that. I leaned against the fence. Funny thing, I called out. My property line hasn't moved an inch since 1978. Mark whipped around. Oh, morning, he said with a sarcastic nod. Just doing some assessments. Yeah, I said. Assessing what exactly? He held up the clipboard like a badge. Drainage, erosion control, community expansion plans. Banjo growled. I didn't blame him. That's HOA land, Mark said, pointing at his own feet. Survey says so. I pointed at the old cast-iron boundary marker sticking out of the soil, clear as day. That marker says otherwise. The younger worker looked at it, then at me, then whispered, "Told you," under his breath. But Mark waved him off. New maps override old ones. Simple. Simple. Sure. What happened next rattled me more than I care to admit, because instead of leaving, like any honest survey crew would, they kept going. They dragged their measuring wheel across my grass. They planted little pink survey flags every 10 feet. They made notes, took pictures, and acted like the land belonged to them. Every time the wheel clicked, my jaw tightened. Click, 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 claiming ground that wasn't theirs. I recorded everything, from the porch, from the shed, from the fence line. I wasn't sure what I'd do with the footage yet, but I knew I'd need it. Around mid-morning, I saw Karen's white SUV again. She didn't approach me this time. She parked behind the surveyors and stepped out wearing a neon safety vest over her designer blouse, clipboard in hand, sunglasses, phone to her ear. She pointed at the creek, she pointed at my barn, she pointed at the well pump. It didn't take a genius to see she was carving out a mental blueprint, rehearsing the land like an actress blocking a stage. Then, she did something I'll never forget. She took a piece of orange tape, walked to my side of the fence, and wrapped it around one of my fence posts. Then she stepped back, looked right at me, and smiled. Not a warm smile, not even a fake polite one. It was the smile a hunter gives a deer right before they pull the trigger. By noon, a long white stake appeared 6 feet inside my property. By three more stakes showed up on the south side. By sunset, a full row of flags stretched from east to west, like a neon line of future trespass. That night, while checking my hidden cameras, I caught something else. The younger worker standing alone beside the equipment, rubbing the back of his neck, staring toward my house with a sad, almost apologetic look. He whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Then he pulled out his phone, took a picture of the illegal stakes, and hurried away like he didn't want to get caught. Breadcrumb number 2. And a big one. Meanwhile, the HOA Facebook page lit up with a new post. Upcoming improvements to common land. Expect noise and equipment. Common land. They really believed repeating a lie often enough would make it truth. I turned off the porch light and sat there a long time in the dark, listening to the distant hum of engines and the faint rustle of survey flags flapping in the wind. Something was coming, something big, and for the first time in years, the land didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched, measured, sized up. The storm wasn't here yet, but I could feel the pressure drop. Tomorrow, they'd make their next move. And it wouldn't just be flags or surveys, it would be the first strike. Some sounds you never forget. A rattlesnake's warning, a tornado siren cutting through humid summer air, the low groan of a generator coming to life after a storm. But the sound that woke me at 5:12 that morning, that one carved itself into my bones. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't wind, it wasn't anything natural. It was the deep metallic grrrr of diesel engines idling. Too close, too early, too wrong. I sat up in bed, heart thumping like I'd been running, not sleeping. Banjo lifted his head beside me, ears sharp, growling before his paws even hit the floor. When Banjo growled before sunrise, it never meant anything good. I yanked on my boots, no socks, threw on the first shirt I found, and stepped out onto the porch. What I saw made my breath hitch. Dust. Thick, swirling, copper-red dust rising like smoke around silhouettes of heavy machinery. A bulldozer, 2 backhoes, a dump truck, all lined up along the western boundary of my land. Engines rumbling, headlights cutting through the haze. And right there in the middle, as if she were directing some twisted parade, stood Karen Martell, safety vest over a floral blouse, designer sunglasses, clipboard in hand. She looked like a CEO at a groundbreaking ceremony. She waved at me across the trench being carved, like she was greeting a neighbor at a barbecue. "Morning, Mr. Reed," she shouted over the machines. My jaw clenched. "What the hell is this?" I barked, marching toward the fence. Banjo trotted beside me, teeth bared. Karen strode up calmly, too calmly, like she'd been rehearsing for this. "Just a bit of work on our side of the boundary," she said, flipping her clipboard around as if it were holy scripture. "Routine drainage and soil reinforcement." I looked past her. The trench already ran 20 yards long, 4 feet deep, and getting deeper by the second. The backhoe operator didn't even slow down when I approached. He just shifted gears and widened the cut. "You planning to dig all the way around?" I asked, though I knew damn well the answer. Karen smiled, a real smile this time, one that didn't hide a thing. "Well, now that you mention it, yes." The audacity hit me like a punch. "And you didn't think you needed to ask me first?" "We checked the plat lines," she said. "This trench is entirely within Sunny Hollow jurisdiction." I stared her down. "Karen, you're encroaching on my land. What you're doing is illegal." She shrugged, palms up, voice sugary sweet. "Oh, come on now, Evan. No need for dramatics. Look at it this way. A little isolation might help you reconsider our offer." Isolation. She said it like she was suggesting a spa retreat. I turned as the bulldozer pivoted toward the southern edge of my land. The flags from yesterday were gone, swallowed into the trench. New stakes were already popping up, marking the next cut. They weren't just trenching, they were circling me. If they closed the loop, I'd have one narrow driveway left. And judging by the dump truck backing toward that spot, I knew exactly what they intended. "Get your machines off my land," I said. Karen didn't blink. "Evan, you're becoming difficult." I leaned in. "I'm about to become a whole lot more difficult." But she wasn't listening. She never had been. A horn honked behind her, 2 sharp blasts. The backhoe operator waved her over. She turned, annoyed, muttered something into her radio, and jogged away. I stood there, dust settling around me, banjo pressed against my leg, every nerve on fire. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication. This wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was a siege. I stormed back into the house, grabbed my phone, and dialed the sheriff's department. The dispatcher, kind voice, probably mid-50s, asked if there was immediate danger. "Well," I said, staring out the window at a literal moat being dug around my home, "if a few tons of heavy machinery cutting off my water, road access, and property isn't danger, I don't know what is." A deputy, Wilkins again, arrived 35 minutes later. Too young, too polite, too unsure. He walked the trench with me, took notes, nodded at the right times. Then Karen came out, all smiles and laminated maps. She handed Wilkins a sheet so shiny it practically reflected the sun. "These are the updated boundaries," she chirped. I looked at the lines, bold, thick, wrong. Wilkins's eyebrows knit. "Well, I'll have to verify these with the county," he said cautiously. "For now, no one crosses into your home lot. Technically. Technically." That damn word tasted like battery acid. Karen smirked behind him, arms folded, victory practically radiating off her. That night, I sat on the porch with Banjo asleep at my boot and a lukewarm beer in my hand, watching the last machine rumble away. The trench ran like a scar around the land my father taught me to care for. 5 feet wide, 6 feet deep, fresh, raw earth torn open like a wound. They'd be back in the morning. I knew it. I felt it. And when they returned, they wouldn't stay on their side of the line anymore. Sheriff's vehicles make a very specific sound on gravel. Steady, slow, cautious. It's a sound I'd grown up trusting, but that morning, as Deputy Wilkins stepped out of his cruiser, trust was the last thing I felt. He was young, too young for a situation like this. Still had that fresh out of academy stiffness in his shoulders, that look of a man who believes paperwork solves everything. "Morning, Mr. Reed," he said. His eyes drifted past me, down toward the trench. They widened, just a little, but not enough for me to take comfort in. I motioned for him to follow me to the western side. Banjo stayed close, tail low, not barking, just watching. Dogs know tension better than people. Wilkins walked along the trench with me, flipping through his notepad as if answers might appear there by magic. "This started at 5 this morning?" he asked. 5:12, I corrected. "Haven't stopped since." We rounded the corner and saw another section, deeper, wider. The bulldozer's tracks cut straight across land my father and I had walked 1,000 times. Wilkins let out a low whistle. "Yeah, this is something." "Something illegal," I said. He didn't respond. Then Karen strutted toward us, clipboard tucked under her arm like it carried the power of the Constitution. "Deputy Wilkins," she called out, voice dripping sugar. "Glad you're here. Everything is in order." She handed him laminated documents. Too shiny, too perfect, too new to be real. Wilkins studied them, squinting. These are the updated cadastral lines? Yes, she said confidently. I stepped forward. No, they're not. Those lines were thicker than a child's crayon. Look at the ink. It's fresh. And the property marker is right there. I pointed at the old cast iron post buried halfway in the soil. Imperfect, weathered, real. Karen didn't even look at it. Wilkins cleared his throat. I can't determine boundary disputes on site. That has to go through zoning. Deputy, I said slowly, carefully. They're digging a trench around my home. They've blocked my road. They're cutting off access. That's not a dispute. That's entrapment. He winced like the word made him uncomfortable. Is anyone in immediate danger? He asked. I stared at him. The bulldozer growled past, carving deeper. Dust rained down. My well pump sat directly behind the next flag line, and he asked if anyone was in danger. Not yet, I said through clenched teeth, but they're working on it. Wilkins shifted his weight. Sir, these situations are tricky. This looks like a civil matter, a land disagreement. I can file a report, but I can't stop construction unless there's imminent harm. Karen smiled behind him, like a cat that had just found a box of baby birds. See, she said sweetly, no crime here. I ignored her. So you're telling me, I said, that if someone digs a moat around my house and blocks my access entirely, you can't intervene? He swallowed. I'm telling you we need official survey confirmation before we can do anything, I finished for him. Wilkins nodded, almost apologetically. I'll file a report. You should also start documenting everything. Photos, videos, timestamps, and you might want to talk to a lawyer. Karen folded her arms like she'd been waiting to hear those exact words. I took a breath, a slow, deep one, the kind you take when the only thing holding your anger back is the weight of the law you believe in. Fine, I said, then I'll document it. I turned and walked away. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard the bulldozer shift gears again. The trench stretched longer, deeper, wrapping the land like an iron snake. Wilkins drove off, dust rising, leaving me in the middle of a slowly tightening noose. Karen lingered behind, tapping her clipboard. Then she called out, almost cheerfully, "Don't worry, Evan. This will all make sense soon." I didn't answer, didn't look back. But inside, something hardened. If the law wasn't going to protect my land, then my cameras would. And in the days ahead, they'd catch something even Karen didn't expect. Fear doesn't always arrive with a scream. Sometimes it comes slow, like cold water rising around your ankles while you're too distracted to notice. That's how the next 3 days unfolded. Quiet, steady, suffocating. The morning after Deputy Wilkins left, I woke to a silence that felt wrong. No engines, no digging, just a thick, heavy stillness. For a second, I thought maybe the HOA had backed off. Maybe they'd realized how insane this all was. Then I heard the grinding cough of a diesel engine shutting down. I stepped outside, banjo glued to my leg, and saw it. A massive dump truck parked sideways across my driveway, blocking the only way in or out. No driver, no keys, no permission. Just sitting there like a steel barricade someone had dropped from the sky. A laminated sign dangled from the grill. Temporary construction obstruction, do not move. Signed by some fictional Sunny Hollow infrastructure division. I felt my jaw clench. They weren't trying to inconvenience me. They were cutting me off. Delivery trucks wouldn't cross that barrier. Grocery orders were canceled automatically. Trash pickup left a voicemail saying they could not access the property due to construction. They were isolating me, one quiet step at a time. Later that morning, I turned on the kitchen faucet and watched the water come out cloudy. Mud swirling in the stream like someone had stirred the bottom of the well. I grabbed my hat and headed to the pump. One vibration from the backhoe the day before had hit the ground so hard it likely shook loose decades of sediment. Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. When I reached the well, Banjo began sniffing and whining, circling the pump housing. I knelt beside him, and that's when I caught the faint scent. Barely there, but unmistakable. Diesel, not spilled in a puddle, not enough to harm anything. Just enough to let me know someone had been there. Someone had put their hands where they didn't belong. It didn't poison the water. It poisoned my peace. That night, the land around me felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. The kind of stillness that happens before a storm breaks something open. I sat on the porch with a lantern beside me, watching shadows stretch across the trench like fingers trying to pull the darkness closer. Banjo stayed restless, walking back and forth, ears pinned flat, tail low. Dogs don't question their instincts. Humans do, and usually to their own detriment. Around 1 a.m., laughter floated across the field. Not friendly laughter, not drunk laughter, the kind of mean-spirited snickering teenagers give when they know they're doing something they shouldn't. But they feel protected enough not to care. I didn't see anyone, but I heard them. Boots shifting in the dirt, metal clanking, soft voices whispering too low to make out. When morning came, I found boot prints in the soft dirt near the porch, fresh ones, leading right up to the steps before turning away. Whoever it was had gotten close enough to see right into my windows if they wanted. I checked the camera logs. One of the hidden units near the tree line had gone offline for exactly 9 minutes that night. 9 minutes. Someone had been back there. I didn't tell anyone. Who was there to tell? My pantry was already thinning. I'd always stocked food, but not for a siege. The driveway blockade made deliveries impossible. Even old Tom Halverson, my neighbor of nearly 20 years, texted me back saying, "Evan, sorry friend. HOA folks came by last night, told us not to interfere, threatened citations. They're serious. I'll help when I can, but not right now. Fear spreads faster than fire on Oklahoma grass." By late afternoon, Banjo still wouldn't leave the well side alone. He whined, circled it, pawed at the ground. I followed him and saw the fresh scrape marks, boot tread I didn't recognize. And then I noticed the faintest glisten of fuel residue near the intake pipe. Someone had been there, again, not enough to ruin my water, just enough to say, "We can touch anything you rely on." My stomach tightened so hard I had to stand up. By sunset, everything, my road, my water, my supplies, felt fragile, exposed, vulnerable. Fear crept closer, step by step. Not panic, not hysteria. A quieter fear. A smarter fear. The kind that whispers, what if they don't stop? What if this never ends? That night, sleep wasn't even on the table. I sat at the kitchen table staring at old survey maps of my land, running my finger along the trench line, seeing how little ground remained before they'd completely circled me. Banjo lay beside my chair but didn't sleep either, just stared at the door like he expected someone to open it. And somewhere around 3 a.m., while tracing one boundary line over and over, a realization hit me hard enough that it made my chest ache. They weren't just trying to pressure me, they weren't trying to scare me, they were trying to break me, to grind me down until I either sold the land or left it behind, to trap me, to isolate me, to make me desperate. And for one terrifying moment, a moment I don't like admitting, I wondered if they might actually succeed. But that moment of despair, that crack in my confidence, it pushed me somewhere they didn't expect. It pushed me to fight back with the one thing they didn't know I had: hidden cameras. All 12 of them, placed where no one would ever think to look. And soon, very soon, those cameras would capture something that wouldn't just prove trespassing, but prove criminal intent. The kind of evidence that could bulldoze their entire operation. The kind of evidence Karen never saw coming. By Saturday morning, the air felt heavier. Dust hung low across the fields, drifting like smoke. You could almost taste the tension, metallic and bitter, like a storm about to break. I hadn't slept more than an hour. Banjo lay under the window, eyes half open, tail thumping softly, every time I shifted like he was checking that I was still alive. The trench circled half the property now, a raw, jagged wound stretching across the land like something from a battlefield. Every time a backhoe clawed at the dirt, the house shook. I was sitting at my desk reviewing footage, again, when I noticed a little icon blinking on the screen. New email, unknown sender. I frowned. Most people around here didn't email. Folks in Oklahoma prefer handshakes or phone calls. An email from an unknown address was unusual enough to make me lean in. The subject line read, "You didn't hear this from me." My finger hovered, cautious. I clicked. Inside was a single sentence. "They're not building drainage, they're prepping phase 3. Below it, a photograph. A blurry shot, taken at dusk, of a document laid across a pickup tailgate. I zoomed in. My heart thudded. It wasn't a drainage plan. It wasn't erosion control. It was a blueprint. A detailed architect-grade blueprint titled Sunny Hollow Expansion, Phase 3 Development. And right in the center was the shock. Nearly half the new homes were drawn on top of my land, not near it, not adjacent, on it. My house, my well, my barn, my father's workshop were labeled under the category Future Recreational Green Overlay. They wanted to pave my history, my inheritance, my life, into a park. I scrolled down. Under the blueprint was a second attachment, a photo of a handwritten note pinned to a corkboard. Read property, acquisition target, stop negotiating, begin pressure sequence, KM, Karen Martell. For a moment, I just sat there, silent, still. Then the weight hit me like a falling tree. This wasn't harassment. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was premeditated. They weren't trying to push me. They were trying to erase me. Before I could even steady my breath, another email arrived from the same sender. I couldn't say anything earlier. They watch everything. I'm trying to help. They're lying to everyone. Get out of the house tonight. Don't let them corner you. There was no name, no signature, but I recognized the tone, the nervousness, the young surveyor, the one with the soft voice and guilty eyes, the one who tried to warn Mark, the one who looked back at my fence line like he wished he could say more. Breadcrumb to 1, breadcrumb to 2, and now breadcrumb 3. Except this wasn't a breadcrumb, this was a flare shot into the sky. The file name of the blueprint caught my attention too. Phase 3 Final KM.pdf, as if Karen herself had saved it. I pulled up my hidden camera footage again and watched the frames roll by. 001241, backhoe crossing onto my side. 001307, 2 workers dragging survey flags. G1855, Mark laughing about he'll cave by next week. 003214, the young worker looking around nervously. 003216, he lifts his phone and secretly snaps photos of stakes. 3221, he slips something into his vest pocket. And now I knew what he'd been taking pictures of, the evidence he would later email me. I stared at the blueprint until my vision blurred. My land, my father's land, drawn over with pastel colors and neat little house icons like it was an empty lot waiting for construction. They had already decided I didn't exist. My stomach twisted. A heat rose in my chest. Anger, fear, disbelief, boiling together until I had to push back from the desk and pace the room. My mind raced. Why were they so desperate? Why couldn't they just build around me? Why dig the trench? Why isolate me? Why the secrecy? Then the answer clicked, cold and terrible. If I couldn't access my well, if I couldn't leave my property, if I ran out of supplies, if the house became unsafe, they could claim the land was abandoned, uninhabitable, unfit for occupancy. And under some obscure municipal statute, abandoned land adjoining planned development projects can be seized by the municipality or a private developer under contract after emergency review. Phase 3 wasn't just about expansion. It was about expectation, that I'd break, that I'd give up, that I'd fail. But they didn't count on one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone inside their own operation, an employee, a surveyor, a kid in over his head, was sending me proof that could burn Karen's entire empire to the ground, and I wasn't about to waste it. I sat down, steadying my breath, feeling something shift inside me. The fear receded. Determination took its place. They wanted to cut me off? Fine. They wanted to push me? Let them. Because now, for the first time, I had something they didn't. The truth. And truth, real truth, has teeth. Nights out here are supposed to be peaceful. Oklahoma nights are famous for it. Big sky, quiet fields, coyotes singing in the distance. But that night, the silence felt wrong. Dead wrong. There's a kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. The kind that feels intentional, like the whole world is holding its breath. That was the quiet that wrapped around my house at 2:43 a.m. I didn't know the exact time when I woke. That came later, when I checked the footage. But I woke suddenly, not from a sound, but from the absence of one. Banjo was already up, standing rigid beside the bedroom window, lips pulled back in a silent snarl. It wasn't barking, not even growling, just breathing fast, chest pumping, eyes locked on the darkness outside. When a dog gets that still, that focused, something's out there. I slid slowly out of bed, careful not to make the floorboards creak. I moved to the window beside Banjo and pulled the curtain back just an inch. At first, I saw nothing, just the pale moonlight grazing the edge of the trench. Then I saw movement, 2 shadows near the southern cut, low, fast, intentional. I squinted. Not raccoons, not coyotes. People. 2 men in dark HOA-issued windbreakers, reflective stripes barely catching the moonlight. They moved with the precision of people who had rehearsed this. One carried a flashlight pointed straight at the ground. The other hefted something heavy. Cinder blocks, stacked in the bed of their truck. One after another, they hauled them toward the trench. Banjo's breath quickened. I felt adrenaline hit my bloodstream like cold lightning. They weren't digging tonight. They were filling the one gap I'd carved out earlier that day. The small passage I needed to haul in water barrels. Cut that off, and I'd have nothing but mud and a useless well. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, turned on the camera, and crept through the house to the front door. I didn't turn on any lights. Darkness was my ally now. The porch boards felt cold under my bare feet as I stepped outside. The night air hit me sharp, with the smell of dust and disturbed earth drifting from the trench. The men didn't hear me. They were too busy dropping cinder blocks, one by one, into the narrow passage. Thud, thud, thud. Each impact echoed through the quiet like a coffin being nailed shut. And standing behind them, arms crossed, coat pulled tight, hair pinned back, was Karen Martell. No clipboard this time, no smile, just a hard, satisfied stare, like someone watching the final piece of a plan click into place. I lifted my phone slightly, framed her in the center, then hit record. Her voice floated across the dirt, low but clear. Just make sure this section is solid. If the edge of his foundation cracks or the pump line collapses, well, insurance will handle the mess. My blood ran cold. Not harassment, not intimidation, premeditated structural sabotage. That sentence, that one damn sentence, was the moment everything changed. It wasn't a civil dispute anymore. It wasn't an HOA overstepping. It was criminal intent. Banjo let out a low growl beside me, too low for them to hear, but enough to vibrate through my ribs. I stepped forward just enough for my shadow to fall across the dirt. One of the men froze. He looked up, saw me, eyes wide. Karen turned, startled, but only for a second. Then she straightened her shoulders, chin high, like she still held the upper hand. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I lifted my phone, the flashlight now on, pointed straight at her face. Her eyes flickered, not afraid. Just exposed. The younger of the 2 workers, the one carrying blocks, muttered, "Karen, maybe we should—" "Keep going," she hissed. But he didn't. He set the block down gently, like it might explode if he dropped it. His gaze flicked between me and the trench, between my camera and the heavy machinery looming behind them. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "this doesn't feel legal." Karen whipped toward him. "Do you want your job?" she spat. And that's when I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, wasn't angry, just steady, unshakable. "I'm recording," I said. "Everything." Karen stiffened. The older worker swore under his breath. The younger one stepped back, shaking his head. "I'm done," he muttered, walking toward the truck. Karen's voice snapped like a whip. "You'll regret this, Evan. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I didn't move, didn't flinch. But I did tilt the phone just enough so the screen glow lit the cinder blocks, the trench, the men, and most importantly, Karen's face. Then I said the one thing that made her lips go pale. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and so will the sheriff." For a moment, everything froze. The men, Karen, even the wind seemed to pause. Then the younger worker climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and sped off down the gravel road, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Karen stood there, fists clenched, chest rising fast. She didn't speak another word, but her silence was louder than any threat she could have made. By the time I stepped back inside the house, Banjo close behind, I knew one thing for certain. Tonight wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the HOA's downfall. Because that 2:43 a.m. footage, with her voice, her orders, her intent, would be the evidence the law couldn't ignore. I didn't plan to confront them that night. I didn't even plan to leave the house again. But plans don't matter when someone's trying to bury your life meter by meter. After the 2:43 a.m. incident, I tried to sit still, tried to breathe, tried to think. But the sound of those cinder blocks dropping into the trench kept echoing in my head, heavy, final, like the thud of a door locking shut behind you. Banjo paced the living room, restless. I could feel his unease crawling up my spine. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, not from cold, from anger. A slow rising bone-deep anger that had been simmering for days, now finally boiling over. I opened the gun safe, not fast, not in panic, deliberate. Inside was my father's old 12-gauge shotgun. A clean, legal, well-maintained piece of hardware he taught me to use the same summer he taught me how to replace a generator fuel filter. The action clicked smooth as butter when I checked it. Loaded, safe, familiar. I slung it over my shoulder, not pointing it, not waving it around, just carrying it the way a man carries a tool he hopes he won't have to use. Banjo followed me, tail stiff, ears locked forward. Outside, the night was still alive with movement. The two workers had left, but Karen's SUV remained parked near the trench. And two more silhouettes, new ones, moved near the trench line. These weren't surveyors. These men were bigger, bulkier, dressed in dark jackets with HOA security printed across the back. HOA security wasn't a real thing, not legally, not here. They had no authority, no jurisdiction, but they had flashlights, they had radios, and they were on my property. I walked toward them, boots crunching softly on the gravel, not hiding, not sneaking, just making myself known. "Evening," I said, loud enough to carry. The men froze. One lifted his flashlight. The beam slid across my chest, across the shotgun slung back over my shoulder, across Banjo's bared teeth. "What do you think you're doing?" the larger one barked. His voice was aggressive, but the tremble at the end told another story. "This is private property," I said, calm and steady. "What are you doing?" "Securing a hazard zone," he snapped. "Hazard you created," I replied. Karen stepped into the flashlight glow as if summoned. Her eyes sliced through the dark. Angry, desperate, determined. "Put the weapon down." "Evan," she said sharply, "you're threatening my team." "No," I said. I tilted my chin, letting the flashlight beam catch the shotgun without raising it. "I'm stating the law." I took one slow step forward. "This land is mine. You're trespassing, and under Oklahoma law, I have every right to defend my property." The smaller security guy shifted uneasily. "Karen," he murmured, "maybe we should—" "Shut up," she hissed. Her attention snapped back to me. "You're going to regret this, Evan. You can't intimidate us." "I'm not here to intimidate anyone," I said. "I'm here to tell you this ends now." Behind me, the porch light flicked on automatically, a warm, steady glow that framed me like a spotlight. Karen lifted her chin higher, but her bravado wavered. "You're unhinged," she spat. "Walking around with a gun? Recording people without consent? You're going to jail." I let out a single breath, calm, cold. "I recorded you ordering structural sabotage around an occupied home. I recorded your men blocking my only exit. I recorded your workers trespassing, tampering with my well, and tonight, trying to bury my access entirely." I pointed to the trench with my free hand. "And I recorded the moment you said you didn't care if my foundation cracked, or if I got hurt, because insurance would handle it." Her face drained of color. You misunderstood." "No," I interrupted. "The deputies won't." The large security man lowered his flashlight. The smaller one took a step back. Karen's hands shook. Her anger faltered. Fear slipped through for the first time. "You can't stop us," she whispered. But even she didn't believe it. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up between us. The screen glowed. The recording was still playing, crystal clear, her voice unmistakable. Banjo growled. I stepped closer to the trench. "This is your last warning," I said quietly. "Leave my land, tonight, now." No shouting, no theatrics, just truth, and truth scared them more than the shotgun ever could. The security men exchanged a look, then another. Without a word, they started backing away. Karen didn't move at first, frozen, breathing hard. Then something in her cracked. She turned sharply, heels digging into the dirt, and stormed back toward her SUV. The door slammed, engine roared, gravel flew. Within seconds, they were gone. The night became still again. For the first time in days, I felt the land breathe. Banjo nudged my hand, tail loosening. I exhaled, slow, controlled, but I knew better than to think it was over. Tonight was just the turning point, the moment everything flipped. because the next day, the sheriff wasn't coming to file a report anymore. He'd be coming to make arrests. Morning light hit the trench like a wound carved into the earth. Dust from last night still clung to the air, settling on the cottonwoods and on the old boards of my porch. I'd lived on that land 42 years, and I'd never felt the place so wrong, so violated, so twisted out of its natural rhythm. But today was different, because tucked inside my shirt pocket was a flash drive holding the one thing Karen Martell didn't know existed: audio of her own voice saying the words that would bury her. If the foundation cracks or he gets hurt, insurance will handle it. There's no confusion in a sentence like that, no miscommunication. That was intent. Cold, deliberate intent. I called the sheriff's office, and this time I made one request. I need Sheriff Wright, no one else. He showed up just past 9, pulling slowly up the gravel like a man who already smelled trouble before stepping out of the car. Wright was the kind of lawman who had been around long enough to see the difference between a petty dispute and real danger. Gray beard, calm eyes, boots older than half the county. He didn't waste time on small talk. He took one long look at the trench, the crushed soil, the damage to the earth around my well line, then nodded for me to lead him inside. Banjo sniffed him, decided he approved, then lay down near the door. I sat right in front of the monitor, where all my hidden cameras fed into storage. Before I played anything, I said quietly, "I didn't provoke them. I didn't threaten anyone. I just documented everything they did." He nodded once. "Show me." So, I did. The footage played out across the screen, slow, undeniable, unblinking. The workers hauling cinder blocks, the cut boundary markers, the trench closing in like a tightening noose. And then the centerpiece, Karen stepping into frame, pointing toward my home, her voice sharp and steady, as she gave orders that could have killed me if things went wrong. Wright didn't interrupt, didn't react, didn't even breathe loud. He watched like a man sorting puzzle pieces he already suspected belonged to a darker picture. Then the moment came on screen, Karen turning to the workers, telling them to reinforce the trench even if it collapsed something important. And then the line, the one that froze the room silent. "If something happens to him, insurance will handle the mess." When the clip ended, the monitor went dark, but the weight of her words stayed there between us. Wright let out a slow breath. "Mr. Reed, what you've shown me is no longer a civil dispute. This is criminal, multiple counts." He spoke plainly, like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "You've got trespass, you've got property damage, interference with essential infrastructure, harassment, and that trench, blocking your only exit." He paused. "That's unlawful imprisonment. A felony. Straight up." He reached for his radio, pressed the button with a firmness that came from years on the job. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Wright. I need 2 units from county. We have probable cause for detainment of Sunny Hollow HOA personnel, including Karen Martell. I'll brief on arrival." The reply crackled through the static. "Copy, Sheriff. Units en route." I handed him the flash drive, the original files, not copies. He slipped it into an evidence pouch like it was gold. In a way, it was. Before he stepped outside, he turned to me. "You handled this right, Evan. You kept calm. You documented everything. They escalated. You didn't." His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen far too many people handle things the wrong way. I walked outside with him. The morning sun was harsh on the churned earth, casting long shadows across the trench. Half an hour later, 2 more cruisers rolled in. Deputies stepped out with that careful posture cops use when they know a situation is about to turn serious. Wright met them halfway, describing what he'd seen, what he'd heard, what he now needed them to do. Then the 3 of them crossed the property line, heading straight towards Sunny Hollow. I didn't follow, didn't need to. I stood there with Banjo beside me, watching dust trail behind their boots as they approached the HOA office. It was almost peaceful, if not for the pounding in my chest. I couldn't see everything from that distance, but I saw enough. Karen opened the door, shoulders stiff, lips already curled into that fake HOA smile she used whenever she thought she still had control. Wright showed her the footage. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could see the moment it hit her. Her face drained from confident peach to dead pale chalk. Her hand slipped from the doorframe. Her lawyers behind her froze like statues. For the first time since the trench was dug, Karen Martell wasn't in charge. The law was, and she knew it. The end was coming fast now, and there was nothing left for her to hide behind. When the deputies escorted Karen out of the HOA office, the sun was nearly straight overhead, casting hard, honest light across everything she'd tried to twist in the dark. I watched from my porch, not hiding, not celebrating, just watching. Karen walked stiff as a board, hands pinned behind her back, wrists wrapped in silver. She kept her chin up as if pretending it wasn't happening would somehow change the fact that Sheriff Wright had read her every right under the law. Her two attorneys scrambled after her, waving papers, arguing, shouting something about misunderstood authorization and overreach. Didn't matter. The truth was louder than anything they said. Wright opened the back door of his cruiser and guided her in. She bent awkwardly, ducking her head. For the first time in weeks, the land felt like it could breathe again. The officers stayed on scene the rest of the afternoon. They taped off the HOA's infrastructure yard, cataloged the equipment, photographed the trench, took statements from workers who suddenly remembered how to tell the truth. One of the younger men, maybe 23, thin beard, nervous eyes, walked up to me when the deputies weren't looking. "Sir," he said quietly, I'm sorry. I tried telling her this was wrong. I didn't want to come back last night." I recognized him. He was the one from earlier, the one who had hesitated, the one who kept glancing toward my house like he knew something wasn't right. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing in the end," I said. "Sometimes that's what counts." He nodded, relief softening his face, then stepped away as Wright approached. "We're freezing their operations," the sheriff said. "County's taking over the administrative side until we finish the investigation. Expect some calls from the DA." I nodded. "What about the trench?" I asked. Wright looked around at the jagged cut circling almost 3 sides of my land. "We'll get it filled, properly this time." And they did. Just after noon the next day, county trucks rolled in. Real county trucks, not the HOA's fancy rentals with painted logos and forged permits. The crew chief shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "We heard what happened. We're going to fix this fast." Machines roared to life, pushing dirt back where it belonged. Dump trucks rattled, bulldozers smoothed the earth, graders leveled the road scar. It was loud work, dusty work, but it was the first noise in weeks that didn't tighten my chest. Neighbors stopped by the fence line. Some apologized. Some looked ashamed. Some didn't say much at all, just nodded in that quiet way folks do when they realize they stood on the wrong side of something. One older woman brought cookies, said she felt awful for not speaking up sooner. I thanked her, even though my stomach was too twisted to eat. By evening, the trench was gone. Just a faint outline remained, like a bruise on the land, reminding anyone who looked close enough that ugly things had happened there. 2 weeks later, Karen stood in court. I didn't attend the first hearing, but the DA sent me updates: forgery, fraud, harassment, criminal trespass, unlawful imprisonment, interference with essential infrastructure. They stacked charges like bricks, almost poetic, considering how many she'd tossed into that trench. She pled not guilty, of course. People like her always do. But her board members didn't line up behind her this time. Some resigned immediately. Some asked for deals. One sent the county a folder of internal messages that made the judge's eyebrows shoot up so fast you'd think they were spring-loaded. Turned out Karen had plans far beyond my land. She was preparing to annex 2 more properties. Mine was just supposed to be a proof of concept, but her concept didn't survive the light of day. A month later, I walked out to check my mailbox, my actual mailbox, no longer blocked or redirected, and found a letter from the county trustee now overseeing Sunny Hollow. It included compensation for damages, reimbursement for legal expenses, and an official apology written in careful, formal language. The money was enough to mend the damage, but the apology, that part mattered more. It meant somebody finally admitted what had been done. I spent the next 2 weeks repairing fences, grading the driveway, and clearing debris. Banjo followed me everywhere, tail high again, nose in the wind like he'd finally decided the land was safe. One crisp morning, before the heat set in, I started putting up the new fence on the west side, cedar panels, 10 feet tall, anchored deep in concrete. I worked slow, steady, measuring twice the way my father taught me, letting the smell of cut wood settle into the air. When it was done, I bolted a small metal sign onto the center panel, black letters, simple, final, trench, 25, never again. I stepped back, hands on my hips, and let the message sink in. Not for show, not for the neighbors, not even for Karen. It was for me. Banjo sat beside me, head tilted like he understood. Maybe he did. The land was quiet again, almost too quiet. No bulldozers, no engines, no fake inspectors, just the Oklahoma breeze moving through the cottonwoods, same as it had for decades. I took a long breath, slow and steady. My land was mine again. Not because I fought harder, not because I shouted louder, but because sometimes the best weapon a man has is the truth he refuses to bury, and I'd caught every bit of it on camera.